I still remember how the fire smelled that night. Cedar smoke. Pine resin. The sharp, clean bite of autumn air threaded through the great hall of the Ironvale pack. I remember thinking, this is where I belong. I was wrong. I was so terribly, completely wrong. His name was Dorian Kane. Alpha. First son of the Ironvale bloodline. A man who could silence a room simply by walking into it. And for 2 years, I believed I was his. Not his chosen mate. Not his marked Luna. But his. There is a difference, I understand that now. Back then, I was still foolish enough to believe that proximity was the same as belonging. That sharing his bed meant sharing his world. That loving him meant he loved me back. The ceremony began at midnight. The whole pack had gathered. Torches lined the stone walls. Elders sat in carved wooden chairs like judges awaiting a verdict. Young wolves pressed forward at the edges, hungry-eyed, whispering. I wore white. I don't know why I wore white. No one told me to. Maybe some part of me already knew, and wanted to mark the moment. The way you dress for a funeral without being told someone has died. Dorian stood at the center of the circle. He didn't look at me when I entered. He should have looked at me. An alpha always looks at his mate when she enters a room. It is instinct. Biology. A pull so deep it cannot be faked or denied. He didn't look. And the whispers started immediately. I walked forward anyway. My chin up. My spine straight. The way my mother had taught me before she was taken. You walk like you belong, Lena. Even when you're afraid. Especially when you're afraid. The elder stepped forward. Old Marin. Ash-white hair. Eyes like river stones, gray and cold and worn smooth by time. She raised her staff. The hall went silent. And then Dorian finally looked at me. There was nothing in his eyes. Not cruelty. Not regret. Not even the decency of guilt. Just nothing. Blankness where warmth should have lived. Lena Voss, Elder Marin said. Her voice carried like smoke through the room. You are brought before this pack for the formal declaration of bond. I waited. Dorian's jaw tightened. Only once. Alpha Dorian Kane, Marin continued. Do you claim this woman as your chosen Luna? Do you bind your blood to hers, your wolf to hers, your name to hers, before moon and pack and bone? The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. 5. Say it, I thought. Just say it. No. 1 word. That's all it took. 1 word, and 2 years of my life turned to ash. I reject the claim, Dorian said. His voice was steady. Practiced. As if he had rehearsed it. As if he had planned this. The crowd, the fire, the white dress, the witnesses. Lena Voss holds no bond to me. She carries no mark. She holds no place in Ironvale. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed. Soft and quickly swallowed. I felt the rejection hit my chest like a physical blow. That's the thing they don't tell you about wolf bonds. When one side refuses, when the denial is spoken aloud before witnesses, you feel it. Like a cord being cut with a dull blade. Slow. Tearing. Leaving frayed edges that never fully heal. My knees wanted to buckle. I didn't let them. You have 48 hours, Marin said, and she was looking at me now with something close to pity. After which time, you are no longer under Ironvale protection. 48 hours. To pack my life. To disappear. To become nothing. I turned. I walked out of that hole. I did not run. I did not cry. Not then. Not where they could see. But outside in the dark, with the pine forest swallowing the firelight behind me, I pressed my back against an oak tree, slid to the cold earth, and I shook. I shook so hard the leaves above me trembled. I didn't know then what I was carrying. I didn't know what had been woken in me, or what was growing. If I had known, God, if I had known, I would not have trembled. I would have burned that hole to the ground. She walked away from everything she knew. But something walked with her. Something that had no name yet. Something that did not belong to Dorian Kane. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting. Chapter 1. The first days were the worst. Not because of hunger. Not because of cold. Because of quiet. I had lived inside a pack for 8 years. You never understand how much noise fills a life until the noise is gone. The low hum of shared meals. The sound of wolves shifting in the night. Laughter through thin walls. Paws on stone. Gone. All of it. Gone. I drove north. I didn't plan to. My hands just pointed the wheel away from Ironvale territory, and I followed until the trees thickened and the road turned to gravel and the gravel turned to dirt. I found a cabin. Abandoned. Dusty. One cracked window sealed with plastic and tape. A wood stove that required convincing. A bed frame with a mattress that had seen better decades. It was perfect. Or rather, it was enough. I survived the first week on canned beans, black coffee, and the grim satisfaction of knowing I had not broken down in front of Dorian Kane. I was proud of that. I am still proud of that. It was the second week that changed everything. The sickness started on a Tuesday. I know it was Tuesday because I had been counting days on the inside of the cabin door with a stub of charcoal. A small ritual. A way of proving time was still moving. Day 12, Tuesday. I woke before dawn with a wave of nausea so violent I barely made it to the door before I was sick in the frost-stiff grass. I crouched there for a long moment. The cold felt good against my palms. A stomach bug, I told myself. Stress. The canned food. The water source. I went back inside. Day 13, the same. Day 14, worse. And on day 15, kneeling on the bathroom floor of a gas station 40 minutes down the mountain, I held a plastic test in my shaking hands and stared at 2 lines that rearranged my entire world. Positive. My first thought was, this is a mistake. My second thought was, Dorian. My third thought, the one I didn't expect, was a feeling. Not fear. Not rage. Warmth. Deep, inexplicable warmth. Right in the center of my chest. As if something inside me was glad. I sat on that cold floor for 20 minutes. Then I drove back to the cabin, added another mark to the door, and sat at the edge of the bed with my hand pressed flat against my still flat stomach. Okay, I whispered. Just that. Okay. The weeks that followed were strange in ways I couldn't name. The pregnancy moved fast. Faster than it should have. I know the normal timeline. I grew up in a pack. I'd seen enough pregnancies, heard enough conversations. By week 6, I already felt more, fuller, warmer, as if something was radiating from the center of my body like a banked fire. My wolf, which had been quiet since the rejection, silenced by it really, like a voice cut off mid-sentence, began to stir again. Not fully. Not the way she used to. But stirring. Restless. Like she could sense something I couldn't yet understand. I pushed it away. I focused on preparing. I drove down to the nearest town, small, anonymous, no wolf scent, and I bought what I needed. Vitamins. Books. Food that wasn't from a can. I started a journal. I started talking to the baby. I know how that sounds. But the cabin was quiet, and the baby, whatever the baby was, felt like company. I don't know who you are yet, I whispered one night, lying on my back, one hand resting on my stomach. The fire had burned low. Outside, the wind moved through the pines like a long exhale. But you're here. And I'm keeping you. The warmth pulsed. I felt it. Just once and brief, like a heartbeat against my palm. From the inside. It was the night of the new moon, week 8, that I understood something was wrong. Or not wrong. Different. I was asleep when the dream came. Not the fragmented, dissolving kind. A clear dream. Vivid and heavy, like a memory that hadn't happened yet. I stood in a forest unlike any I'd known. The trees were enormous, black-barked, silver-leafed, and the moon above was not one moon but 3, silver, gold and deep bone-white. A woman stood at the tree line. She was tall. Bare-shouldered. Her hair was the color of midnight water, dark with light moving beneath it. Her eyes, when she turned to look at me, were silver. Not wolf silver. Not the brief flash of a shift. Ancient silver. Like moonlight that had never known shadow. You carry what was lost, she said. Her voice moved through me like sound through deep water. What does that mean? I asked. She looked at my stomach. The last of the first blood, she said. We have waited a very long time. I woke up gasping. My hand flew to my stomach. The warmth was there, stronger now, pulsing slowly, like a second heartbeat. And for the first time, I asked the question I had been avoiding. If this child isn't Dorian's, then whose is it? Because the timeline was clear. I had been with no one else. No one. And yet, the warmth pulsing beneath my hand did not feel like Dorian's cold, controlled energy. It felt like something older. Something that had no alpha's name. Something that did not belong to any pack on this earth. What was I carrying? Chapter 2. I started keeping records. A scientist's habit, maybe. Or a frightened woman's, trying to impose logic on something that refused to be logical. Week 9. I wrote everything down. The warmth, constant now. Not painful. Almost comforting, if I let myself stop being terrified of it. My wolf, active in a way she hasn't been since before the rejection. Not aggressive. Alert. Dreams, recurring. The three-mooned forest. The silver-eyed woman. Always the same words. The last of the first blood. Physical changes, faster than normal. I am barely 2 months along by human count, but I look and feel 3, nearly 4. I stared at that last line for a long time. Then I added, this child is accelerating. At week 10, something happened that I could not right away. I was chopping firewood in the side yard. Simple work. Rhythmic. My arms were stronger than they'd been before. Another change I'd noted without fully examining. I lifted the axe. And the wood split before the blade touched it. I stood very still. The two halves of the log sat in the snow, perfectly cleaved, and the axe was still raised above my head. I lowered it slowly. That didn't happen. Except it had. I tried again with a second log. This time I held back, let the blade do the work, and I felt it. A pulse from my core, radiating outward, just before impact. A wave of something warm and pressurized, flowing through my arms and into the steel. The log didn't split. It shattered. I dropped the axe and stepped back. My hands were trembling, but not from fear this time. From the effort of containing it. This is not mine, I thought, pressing both hands to my stomach, feeling the answering warmth pulse back against my palms. This is coming from you. The baby pulsed again. Slowly. Steadily. Like a moon rising. I needed answers. I had been avoiding this. Running from it, really, the way I had run from Ironvale, the way I had run from the test result, the way I had run from the dream. Running was easier than knowing. But I could not run from the splintered wood in my side yard, or the pulse beneath my hands, or the acceleration that was making my body feel like a stranger's. There was one person I trusted enough to reach out to. One person from my old life who had never belonged to Dorian's world, not really. Priya. She was a healer, not pack certified, not sanctioned by any alpha. She operated outside the formal structures, in the gray spaces where wolves who didn't fit the hierarchy went when they were injured or sick or simply in need of someone who asked no questions. I had met her 3 years ago. She had set my broken wrist after a training accident and charged me nothing. She had gray-streaked locks, ink-stained fingers, and a library that smelled like dried herbs and older secrets. I drove 5 hours to reach her. I didn't call ahead. She opened the door before I could knock. Of course she did. Lena Voss. Her dark eyes moved from my face to my stomach, and something shifted in her expression. Quick and controlled, but I caught it. Something between recognition and gravity. Come in. Her cottage was exactly as I remembered. Cluttered and warm. Bookshelves floor to ceiling. Bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. A fire burning slow and low. She gestured to the chair by the hearth. I sat. She stood across from me for a moment, studying, not speaking, and then she knelt and pressed both hands flat against my stomach. I tensed. Relax, she murmured. I tried. The warmth responded to her touch. It rose, like a tide coming in. Her breath caught. barely audible. But I heard it. She held the position for a long count of 10. Then she sat back on her heels and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Something close to awe. How far along? She asked. 10 weeks. Maybe 11. And the father? I paused. Dorian Kane. Her eyes darkened. He rejected you. Publicly. A month ago. And there was no one else? No, I said. And then, carefully, Priya, what do you feel? She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the wind stirred. The fire crackled. Somewhere far away, a bird called once and went silent. What I feel, she said slowly, is something I have read about. Something I believed was a myth. Tell me. She looked at me. There are accounts, she said, in texts older than any living pack. Before the alpha bloodlines. Before the hierarchy. Before the bond system as we know it. She stood, moved to a shelf, began searching with practiced fingers. In those accounts, there is a lineage called the First Blood. A bloodline that predates the wolf packs entirely. Not alpha. Not omega. Not any rank we have a word for. She found a book, old dark-spined, the title worn away, and brought it to the table. The First Blood was said to carry the original wolf spirit. The source. Not a descendant of it, the source itself. She opened the book to a page near the center. An illustration, a woman standing beneath 3 moons. Bare-shouldered. Dark hair. My breath left me. The first bloodline was thought to have died out, Priya said quietly. Centuries ago. When the alpha bloodlines consolidated power, she paused. They made sure of it. The warmth in my stomach pulsed. Hard. They hunted them, I said. It wasn't a question. Priya closed the book. Yes. I pressed my hand against my stomach. Against that slow, rising warmth. And this child, I said. You think. I think the line didn't die, Priya said. I think it went quiet. Hidden in your bloodline, dormant for generations. She looked at me steadily. And I think something, the rejection, the trauma, the severing of the bond, woke it. The fire popped. I stared at the closed book. At the illustration beneath the cover I could no longer see. A woman under 3 moons. And my voice, when I spoke, was barely a whisper. If someone finds out what she is. Not if, Priya said softly. She looked toward the window. As if she expected someone to already be standing there. When? I drove back to the cabin in silence. My mind wouldn't settle. It kept circling. The illustration, Priya's voice, the pulse beneath my palm. Not alpha. Not omega. Not any rank we have a word for. The source. I was halfway up the mountain road when my phone lit up on the seat beside me. A number I had deleted. But had not forgotten. Dorian. I stared at the screen. It buzzed again. Again. I let it ring. It stopped. And then, 10 seconds later, a text appeared. We need to talk about the child. My blood turned to ice. He knew. How did he know? I hadn't told anyone. I had barely told myself. My foot pressed harder against the accelerator. He already knows. And a voice inside me, not mine, older than mine, deep and burning like coals, said 4 words with absolute clarity. He cannot have her. She didn't know who was watching. But something in her blood did. And it had already chosen. Chapter 3. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the darkened cabin with my back against the far wall, the wall with no windows, and I watched the door. My wolf was fully awake now. Not the half-stirred restlessness of the past weeks. Awake. Pacing. Hackles raised. She had been muted since Dorian's rejection. A wound that hadn't healed. But now she moved inside me like she had when I was 17 and first learning my shift, all coiled energy and raw instinct. He cannot have her. That voice again. Not a thought. A fact. I pressed my hand to my stomach. The warmth answered immediately, steadier than ever, certain, like a pilot light that could not be extinguished. I know, I murmured into the dark. At some point before dawn, I slept. He came at mid-morning. I heard the car before I saw it, tires on the gravel road half a mile down, and I was on my feet before the engine cut. My body knew him. That's the brutal reality of a wolf bond, even a severed one. Even a denied one. The body encodes the other person, their scent, their footfall, the particular gravity of their presence, and never fully unlearns it. I moved to the window. One vehicle. Black. No pack markings on the exterior, but I recognized the plates. Dorian stepped out first. He was exactly as I remembered. Tall. Dark-coated. The kind of stillness that powerful men perform, because they've learned their very presence is enough to destabilize a room. His scent reached me even through the glass. Wood smoke and dark cedar and something cold underneath, the particular cold of a man who had learned to bury his warmth so deep it barely functioned anymore. I used to think that cold was strength. Now I understood it for what it was. Fear. Dorian Kane was afraid of softness. So he had made himself granite. A second man stepped out of the passenger side. Gray. Lean. Dressed in formal pack attire. I recognized him. Castor Vane. Ironvale's head enforcer. The man who carried out the Alpha's decisions with the efficiency of someone who had long since stopped asking questions. The third figure surprised me. A woman. Young. Dressed in white and gold, the colors of a chosen Luna. My replacement. She brought his chosen mate, I thought. He brought her here. The calculated cruelty of it landed like a stone in still water. I stepped back from the window. My hands had curled into fists without my noticing. The knock, when it came, was 3 measured strikes. Even. Controlled. The knock of a man who did not doubt he would be answered. I breathed. Walk like you belong. Even when you're afraid. I opened the door. Dorian's expression did not change when he saw me. His eyes dropped immediately to my stomach. And for one unguarded moment, something moved in them. Something I wasn't expecting. Not anger. Not possessiveness. Hunger. Not for me. For her. My wolf snapped inside my chest. Lena, he said. You don't have the right to use my name, I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. You made that choice in front of the entire pack. Something tightened along his jaw. That's not why I'm here. Then state why you're here and leave. He studied me for a long moment, the cold, assessing gaze of an alpha cataloging a situation for advantage. May I come in? No. The woman in white, his Luna, made a soft sound. I didn't look at her. I refused to give her that. Castor spoke for the first time. This can be conducted civilly. If your alpha wanted civility, I said, still looking at Dorian, he should have chosen it 6 weeks ago. Dorian cut a glance at Castor. A micro-expression. Stay back. Then he looked at me again. The child, he said quietly. I know you're pregnant. Congratulations. The child carries unusual energy, Lena. He took one step forward. Just one. Energy I need to understand. Why? Because it's mine. My wolf went utterly still. And then she laughed, a low, almost soundless vibration through my ribs that had no humor in it. Pure wolf logic. Pure denial. No, she said. No, he is not. I leaned slightly against the doorframe, keeping my posture loose, my expression neutral. The child is not yours, Dorian. The silence that followed was absolute. The woman in white went rigid. Castor's expression didn't flicker, but his hand moved just slightly toward his coat. And Dorian's eyes went black. Not dark brown. Not the shadowed eyes of a man controlling anger. Black. The wolf surface rising. Say that again, he said, very softly. The child is not yours. I held his gaze without blinking. You severed the bond yourself. Before witnesses. Before the elder. By your own declaration, I hold no place in Ironvale and you hold no claim to anything I carry. Pack law. Does not apply to you in my home, I said, because I am no longer in your pack. He stared at me. I stared back. and the warmth in my stomach pulsed, hard and certain, like a heart confirming what my words had said. He has no claim here. The standoff held for 10 seconds. 20. Then Dorian exhaled, slow and controlled, and the darkness receded from his eyes like a tide pulling back from shore. "You've been to see Priya," he said. My blood chilled. "I don't know what you're." "I have eyes in many places, Lena." Not a threat. A statement. The quiet confidence of a man who had built his world around never being surprised. "I know you drove to her yesterday. I know you were there for 2 hours." I said nothing. "Whatever she told you," he continued, his voice dropping lower, "private now, almost intimate, which was somehow worse. It is not the full story." "And you have the full story." "I have enough." "Then you have more than I need from you." I put my hand on the door. "You should leave." "Lena," I said. "The child is in danger." I stopped. My hand stilled on the door. The warmth in my stomach pulsed once, differently this time. A question, not a statement. "Don't," I thought. "Don't let him." "There are people," Dorian said carefully, "who have been watching Ironvale. Watching the territory. For months. I thought they were rivals." He paused. I was wrong. "What are they watching for?" He looked at my stomach. And in that moment, something genuine broke through the granite. Something that looked, almost, like fear. "For that," he said. "For whatever is growing inside you." The silence stretched between us. Somewhere in the trees behind the cabin, a branch snapped. I turned. The tree line was still. But the air had changed, suddenly, completely, the way it changes before lightning strikes. All the small sounds of the forest, birds, wind, the creak of branches, had gone abruptly, completely silent. My wolf stood at full attention. And Dorian was already moving. One arm out, reaching toward me, his wolf visible in the set of his shoulders and the tension in his jaw. "Inside," he said quietly. "Now." "I'm not." "Lena." Something in the forest moved. I didn't see it. I felt it. Cold. Organized. Deliberately suppressed. Like a scent underwater. I moved inside. Dorian followed. And as he pulled the door shut behind us, I saw it, just for a moment through the window, at the edge of the tree line. A figure. Motionless. Watching. Gone before I could be certain it was real. The warmth in my stomach did not pulse this time. It contracted. Small and frightened. The first fear I had ever felt from her. And that, more than anything Dorian had said, more than the figure at the tree line, more than all of it. That terrified me. She had told him he had no claim. But danger does not ask for permission. And something old, something patient, had just arrived at the edges of her world. The question was no longer what she was carrying. The question was, who else already knew? Chapter 4. The cabin felt smaller with Dorian inside it. He took up space the way alphas always do, not physically, not entirely. It was something older than muscle and height. A gravitational pull. The kind of presence that reorganized a room around itself without asking permission. I hated that I still felt it. I hated that my body catalogued him automatically, the shift of his weight, the angle of his jaw, the careful way he moved near me as if I were something that might shatter. I am not fragile, I thought. I survived you. I crossed to the opposite side of the room and did not offer him a seat. He didn't take one anyway. He went to the window. Just stood there, watching the tree line with a stillness that told me his wolf was at full surface. Scanning. Calculating. Castor had taken a position outside. I'd heard his footsteps circle the cabin twice before settling near the vehicle. The woman in white had stayed by the car. Good. I couldn't look at her without feeling something corrosive moving through my chest. Not jealousy. Not exactly. More like grief wearing jealousy's face. Talk, I said. Dorian didn't turn from the window. How long have you been at this location? That's not an answer. It's a necessary question. For weeks, I said. And before you ask, no, I haven't had visitors. No contact with anyone from Ironvale. Until today. No one followed you here. I'd have known. He made a sound that was almost, a laugh. Would you? Don't underestimate me, Dorian. I know you've made a habit of it, but I have never underestimated you. He turned from the window then, and his expression stopped me. It wasn't the granite mask. It was something underneath it. Something raw-edged and tired. What I did, he said quietly, was not about capability. Don't. My voice came out harder than I intended. Whatever explanation you've prepared, I don't want it. Not today. Not while something is watching my cabin. He held my gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then he nodded. All right. The word unspoken. He moved to the table, pulled out a chair, reversed it, sat with his arms crossed over the back. The posture was almost casual. It didn't fool me. The figures at your tree line, he said. I've been tracking a faction of them for 3 months. They call themselves the Pale Court. The name landed oddly in my ears. Not unfamiliar. Not exactly. Like a word in a language you learned as a child and half forgot. I don't know that name. Most wolves don't. His eyes moved to my stomach. They're not wolves. I went still. Not entirely, he amended. They're older. A different branch of the bloodline tree. Scholars, once. Archivists. Something darkened in his expression. Hunters now. Hunters of what? He was quiet for 4 seconds. I counted them. Of first blood descendants, he said. The fire popped. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. I sat with those words for a long moment. Let them settle. Let their weight become real. You knew, I said. Not an accusation. Not yet. A test. Dorian's jaw tightened. Not when I thought I did, he said carefully. What does that mean? It means, he stopped. Looked at the table. Then back at me. It means that the information I had was incomplete. And by the time I understood what I was holding, his voice dropped. The ceremony had already happened. I stared at him. A cold, spreading clarity was moving through me. You rejected me, I said slowly, because you knew the Pale Court was watching Ironvale. He didn't answer. Which was an answer. You thought, what? That cutting the bond publicly would make them believe I wasn't significant? That they'd ignore me if I wasn't your Luna? Still nothing. The warmth in my stomach shifted. Not frightened now. Something sharper. Angrier. Good, I thought. Feel that. Remember it. Dorian. My voice was very quiet. Very even. Did you know what I carried? He met my eyes. No, he said. And I believed him. Not because I trusted him, but because this particular truth was written in his face in a way he couldn't control. I did not know about the child. I did not know about the first blood. I knew only that someone very dangerous had your name. And I. He stopped. You thought pushing me out would save me, I said. The silence confirmed it. I should have felt something warm about that. I didn't. You could have told me, I said. You could have said, Lena, there is danger, I need to protect you differently, I need you to go. You could have trusted me. I know. You made me stand in front of the entire pack. I know. In white. My voice cracked once. Just once. You let them see it. You let them laugh. He was on his feet before I finished speaking. Not moving toward me. Just standing. As if his body had responded before his mind could overrule it. I know, he said, and this time it was barely above a whisper. I looked away from him. Out the window. At the empty tree line. My eyes were burning and I refused, absolutely refused, to let them spill over. The Pale Court, I said, my voice steady again. What do they want with a first blood child? A pause. Power, he said. The first blood isn't just a bloodline. It's a source. A conduit. He moved back to the window, hands deep in his coat pockets. If you can contain it, if you can bind it, you can access something no alpha, no pack, no hierarchy in the modern world has been able to touch. The original wolf spirit. He looked at me sharply. Priya told you. The books told Priya. Centuries ago. I stood, moved to the window beside him, not close enough to touch. Watching the same tree line. The same absence where that figure had been. So they want to bind her. What does that mean, exactly? He was quiet for a moment that stretched 3 seconds too long. Dorian. It means, he said finally, that the child cannot survive the binding. The words sat between us like a blade on a table. I pressed my hand to my stomach. The warmth, my daughter's warmth, and I was thinking of her that way now, daughter, unequivocally, pulsed back against my palm. I'm here, it said. I'm here. They will kill her, I said. They will consume her, Dorian said. There is a distinction. What she carries doesn't die when the body does. It disperses. And they know how to, he stopped. They have tools. Ancient ones. To capture dispersing power at the moment of. Stop. My voice was ice. I understand. I turned from the window. My mind was already moving, cataloguing the cabin's weaknesses, calculating distances, thinking about Priya, thinking about where was safe, what was safe, whether anywhere was safe. How many? I asked. Unknown. 8 confirmed sightings. Possibly more. And they tracked me here. Apparently. How long do I have? He looked at me. Something behind his eyes. Not strategy now. Something more human. Hours, he said. Maybe less. I moved fast. I had not unpacked deeply, a habit of mind maybe, or an instinct I was now grateful for. The journal. The books. The vitamins and the small cache of things I'd collected over the past 4 weeks. 10 minutes to gather everything. 7 to load the car. Dorian stood near the door, watching without offering to help. I didn't want his help. I needed the movement. The efficiency. The feeling of forward motion. Castor came in once, spoke quietly in Dorian's ear, left. The woman in white, his Luna, I heard her voice through the wall, low, and asking a question. Dorian's answer was clipped. Final. She went quiet. I loaded the last bag. Where are you taking me? I asked, standing at my car with the trunk open. Dorian met my eyes. Ironvale. No. Lena. I said no. I closed the trunk. I am not walking back into that pack as what, your ward? Your responsibility? The woman you rejected who came crawling back because she had nowhere else. As my protected guest, he said. Under Alpha law, any wolf in documented danger. I am not Ironvale. You were, he said sharply. Then, quieter, you were. And the law doesn't expire in 48 hours just because I was, he stopped. Say it, I thought. Say what you were. He didn't. The law protects you, he said instead. The pack's walls protect you. A pause. I protect you. I looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had broken me in front of an audience. At the man who had also, apparently, done it to keep the wolves away. At the man whose eyes, right now, held something that was not performance and not strategy. Just a man who was afraid he had gotten something terribly, irreversibly wrong. I thought about the figure at the tree line. I thought about the baby's fear, contracting small and cold beneath my palm. I thought about Priya, not if. When. Ironvale, I said finally. Temporarily. Something in his shoulders dropped by a fraction. Yes. I am not your Luna. I am not under your authority. I will leave the moment I determine it is safe. Agreed. And you, I turned to him fully. You will tell me everything. Every piece of what you know. What you hid. What you suspect. All of it. His jaw tightened. Agreed, he said again. I got in my car. Dorian moved toward his vehicle. And as I pulled out of the cabin's small clearing, as the trees swallowed the rearview image of what had been briefly my hiding place, I felt the warmth in my stomach move with me. Not afraid now. Alert. Ready. I followed Dorian's taillights through the mountain dark. And the whole drive south, I could not stop thinking about what he had said. The ceremony had already happened. He had rejected me publicly to protect me, to remove my name from a target list. And it had failed anyway. Because whatever she was, whatever ancient thing was growing inside me, it could not be hidden by something as small as a severed bond. It could not be disguised by distance or silence, or a woman in white who was not me. The pale court had found me anyway. Which meant one devastating thing. I had never been hidden. They had always known. So why had they waited? What were they waiting for? I drove through the dark. And behind me, far behind, back at the edge of the tree line where the cabin stood empty now, I was almost certain I heard a sound. Low. Sustained. Resonant. Not a howl. Something older than a howl. A signal. She was moving toward the place that had broken her. Moving toward it willingly. Because sometimes the only safety is inside the storm. But she didn't know yet that the storm had teeth of its own. Chapter 5. Ironvale Pack territory began where the valley floor flattened and the road split into three. I had forgotten how it felt. That crossing. The moment you move from borderland into claimed territory, it's not visible, not marked on any human map. But every wolf feels it. A shift in the air pressure. A subtle change in the scent of the soil. The territory's claim settling over you like a second skin. You are here, it says. You are seen. When I had first arrived at Ironvale, 8 years old and newly orphaned, that feeling had been a mercy. Someone knows you are here. Now it felt like a closing door. I followed Dorian's vehicle through the valley gate. The great iron structure had been built by his grandfather, black iron woven with copper wire in the old patterns, both practical and symbolic. It stood 12 feet high. It was never locked. Because nothing that was welcome needed a lock, Dorian had told me once. And nothing unwelcome had ever gotten past it. I drove through. And immediately felt the eyes. The pack was awake. Past midnight, and every light was burning. Word traveled fast in wolf communities, faster than phones, faster than message chains. Something in the shared instinct of a bonded group, a tremor through the web when the alpha moved unexpectedly. Faces at windows. Figures on porches. A group of young wolves near the training ground who stopped what they were doing and simply watched as our small convoy moved through the main path toward the compound. I kept my eyes forward. I did not let myself catalogue who was watching, or how. But I felt it. The assessment. The question. Why is she back? And beneath that, from some of them, why did he let her back? And beneath even that, from the few who had been in the hall that night, who remembered the white dress, who had whispered, something darker. Satisfaction. The satisfaction of a wound reopened. Walk like you belong. I walked like I belonged. The compound was a stone and timber structure that sprawled across the hilltop like something organic, grown rather than built. Additions over generations, each alpha adding rooms, corridors, a new function. It was part fortress, part home, part history. I had spent 2 years in these walls. I knew every corridor, every stairwell. The cold spot near the eastern window that no one could ever explain. The third step that creaked. The kitchen that smelled like cardamom in the mornings. I had loved it here. I hadn't admitted that to myself until now. I stepped out of the car. The night air hit me, cold and clear, carrying pine and snow and the deep wood smoke of the main hearth. And something else. A new scent, woven into the familiar ones. The woman in white. Her scent was already here. Already in the stones. Already layered into the territory. She lives here, I understood. She has been here long enough to be part of the smell of the place. 2 months. In 2 months, she had already taken up residence in the space I had spent 2 years building. I breathed slowly. In. Out. The warmth in my stomach held steady. Good. At least one of us was steady. Dorian was already at the compound door. He held it open, not for effect I thought. Just because it was what his hands knew to do when I was walking behind him. Old habit. Old muscle memory. I walked past him without meeting his eyes. Inside, the main hall was warm. Stone floors covered in woven rugs. The great hearth burning. Lanterns along the walls. And standing in the center of the room, with her arms crossed and her expression carefully composed. Elder Marin. I stopped. She looked at me. Something in her face shifted, not quite warmth, but a close neighbor to it. Something careful and complicated and old. Lena Voss, she said. Elder. You look well. Her eyes moved to my stomach. All of you. We manage, I said. A pause thin and full. You'll take the east guest rooms, she said. Separate access from the main residential wing. Private entrance. A pointed look at Dorian. As agreed. I glanced at Dorian. He had arranged this before he came to the cabin. Before he drove to me. He had planned for the possibility of my refusal, and he had arranged a structure that gave me separation, gave me distance, gave me the closest thing to autonomy that existed inside pack walls. I didn't know whether to be grateful or unsettled. I settled on, noting it, and moving forward. That's acceptable, I said. Marin nodded. Something flickered in her stone-gray eyes. She stepped forward. Just one step. Her voice dropped so that only I could hear it. What you carry is not a secret I can protect indefinitely, she said. There are those within these walls who will recognize it before long. Your power will grow as the child grows. A pause. Be ready. She stepped back. Her public face returned, composed, unreadable, the face of a woman who had been elder before most of the pack was born. Rooms are prepared, she said, to the room. I suggest we all rest. The east guest rooms were exactly as Marin had described, separate, private, quiet. A small sitting room. A bedroom. A washroom. A narrow window that looked out over the east treeline, away from the compound's main spaces. Someone had lit a fire. Someone had put flowers on the table, dried ones, winter-appropriate, small and white. I didn't know who. I made myself not care. I set down my bag. I stood at the window for a long time, watching the trees, watching the dark. No figures. No watchers. Just the forest, still and cold under a sliver of moon. I pressed my hand to my stomach. We're all right, I told her. The warmth pulsed back. Steady. Slower than usual, the long, deep rhythm of a sleeping child. She was resting. Good. Rest while you can, I thought. Sleep, when it came, brought the dream. The three-mooned forest. The black-barked trees. The silver light pooling on the ground like water. The woman was closer this time. Close enough that I could see the details I had missed before. The markings on her bare arms, not tattoos. Something older. Lines and circles etched into the skin in silver, as if the light itself had written there. Her eyes found mine immediately. You have returned to the stone walls, she said. Not a question. I had no choice. There is always a choice. Her expression was not unkind. But you chose correctly. The walls will slow them. Not stop them, but slow them. The Pale Court. She nodded. What are they? I asked. Old enemies. She moved slightly, a gesture I couldn't quite read. When the first blood walked openly, they were scholars of a different kind. They studied the source power not to honor it, but to own it. We called them the Pale Court because they were always watching from the edges. Never in the light. They want my daughter. They want what she is. Her silver eyes held mine without wavering. But she is more than a vessel, Lena. More than a power source. She is a consciousness. An heir to something they can never truly possess, only diminish. A pause. That distinction matters. How do I protect her? You are already doing it. The woman glanced downward, at my stomach, even in the dream, and something crossed her face that I recognized. Pride. Who are you? I asked. She was quiet. The three moons moved above us, slowly, barely perceptible, but I could feel the shift. I am the last one who carried what you carry, she said. The last before the line went quiet. My breath caught. How long ago? 400 years, she said simply. 400 years. This woman had been waiting. For me. For this child. For the line to wake again. Does she have a name? I asked. The power, the spirit, whatever it is that she carries? The woman smiled. It was the first time I had seen her smile, and it changed her entirely. From ancient and solemn to something almost warm. She has many names, she said. But the oldest one, she reached forward, and though we were feet apart, I felt her hand rest briefly, weightlessly against my stomach. Is Mira. The first light. The warmth surged. Full and blazing and joyful. Hello, it said. Hello. Hello. I woke up with tears on my face. Not from grief. From something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. The kind that comes when you realize you are not alone in a darkness you thought no one else had ever entered. Someone had been here before me. Someone had carried this. Someone had survived it. I wiped my face. I breathed. Outside, the first gray of dawn was beginning at the edges of the east treeline. Then I heard it. A knock at my door. Not Dorian's knock, 3 measured strikes. This was softer. 2 taps, then a pause, then one more. A child's knock. A hesitant knock. I went to the door. I opened it. Standing in the corridor, still dressed in her white and gold, but with the formal composure gone. Hair loose, eyes wide, something unguarded and young in her face that her public presentation would never have allowed. Dorian's chosen Luna. Up close, she was younger than I'd realized. 20, at most. Maybe younger. And her eyes, when they met mine, were not hostile. They were frightened. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I know it's early. I know I'm the last person. She stopped. Swallowed. I need to talk to you. I studied her. Her scent reached me, and beneath the white and gold, beneath the lunar markers, there was something else. Something thin and worried. The scent of a person who was not where she wanted to be. Come in, I said. She looked almost shocked that I'd said it. I stepped back. She entered. And the moment she crossed the threshold, she wrapped her arms around herself and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "He doesn't love me, you know. He's never pretended to. He needed a Luna who wouldn't ask questions." She looked at me. I'm asking questions now. She had expected an enemy. She found something more dangerous. An ally. And the question forming in Lena's mind as she studied this frightened young woman. What does she know? What has she seen? And why, of all nights, did she choose tonight to break? Chapter 6. Her name was Sarah. Sarah Novak. 19 years old. Third daughter of the Novak line, a mid-tier pack family with enough standing to be useful to Dorian and not enough power to be a threat. She told me this herself, sitting in the chair by the fire, cradling a cup of tea I'd made because I didn't know what else to do with a frightened girl in my sitting room at dawn. He chose me at a formal gathering in August, she said. Before that I'd met him twice. He was, she considered, polite, distant. He asked my alpha's permission and then mine in that order, and when he made the offer he was very clear that it was a political arrangement. I sat across from her with my own tea, watching, listening. He said he would treat me with respect, that I would have full Luna title and all protections, that the pack would be mine to manage. A pause. He said he didn't have, she looked at her cup, what he called available attachment. Those were the words he used. Available attachment. I thought of 2 years. I thought of the way he used to say my name in the dark, low and careful, like something he was learning not to take for granted. Available attachment. And you accepted, I said. I accepted. She looked up at me. I'm not from a powerful family. It was meant to be an opportunity. A title. A future. She pressed her lips together. I didn't know about you until a week before the ceremony. Something in my chest tightened. What do you mean? I mean no one told me, Sarah said. Not Dorian. Not his council. Not the elders. I found out through a girl in the kitchens who didn't realize I didn't know. Her voice held a careful, steady anger, the kind that has been compressed over a long time. I found out that the alpha I was about to be formally bonded to had shared his home with a woman for 2 years. had shared his. She stopped. Everything. I said nothing. And I thought, she set down the cup. I thought it was over. I thought there had been a clean break. A proper separation. She looked at me steadily. And then he drove to your cabin yesterday. With me in the car. And the way he... She stopped again. I waited. The way he looked at you, she said, and her voice was very quiet now. When you opened that door. That wasn't how he looks at me. That has never been how he looks at me. She lifted her chin. And I'm not saying that to hurt you. Or to make you feel. I know, I said. She nodded. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the pack was beginning to wake. The distant sound of movement. Morning routines. Why are you here? I asked. Not harshly. Genuinely. Sarah looked at her hands. Because last night, she said, after you arrived, I couldn't sleep. And I went to find Dorian, and he was in his study with Castor and Elder Marin and someone I didn't recognize. A man I haven't seen before. She paused. They were all very quiet when I opened the door. What did you hear? Not much. They saw me quickly. But before they did, she met my eyes. I heard Castor say a name. He said it the way you say something dangerous. Another pause. He said Verek. The name meant nothing to me. But the way Sarah said it, careful and afraid, the word itself treated like something with edges, sent a chill down my spine. Verek, I repeated. I don't know who that is, she said. But after Castor said it, Dorian looked, she searched for the word. Like he'd been hit. Just briefly. Just a flicker. She shook her head. I've never seen him look like that. The warmth in my stomach had stilled. Listening. Verek. There's something else, Sarah said. I focused. The man I didn't recognize, the one in the study, I've never seen him in Ironvale before. But I've seen his type. She leaned forward slightly. I grew up near the eastern border territory. When I was small, there were men who used to pass through during the high moon seasons. My mother called them border scholars. Academics. Archivist types. She looked at me. They wore gray. Border scholars. Archivists. Pale court. He's inside the compound, I said. Not loudly. Not panicked. But the meaning of it, the weight of it, was settling over me like cold water. If the Pale Court had someone inside Ironvale's walls, the journey here had not been an escape. It had been a delivery. Dorian had led me to them. I was on my feet before Sarah could react. Stay here, I said. I moved to the door. Lena. Stay in this room. I looked back at her. Lock the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone but me. She stared at me. Young and frightened and something else. Something solid underneath the fear that I hadn't expected to find there. What's happening? She asked. I thought about how much to tell her. I thought about the figure at the tree line. I thought about Priya, not if. When. I don't know yet, I said. But lock the door. The compound corridor was quiet. Most of the pack was still in their residential quarters. The early morning bustle I'd heard was the kitchen staff, the perimeter guards switching shifts. I moved toward the main study. The compound's layout was familiar, muscle memory, even after weeks away. I knew which corridors connected where. I knew the study was accessible from two directions, and that from the servants' passage on the north side, there was a stretch of wall adjacent to the study fireplace that carried sound. I had discovered it by accident, 2 years ago, during a mapping project I'd been running for the PAX records. I had never told Dorian. Some knowledge you keep. The servants' passage was narrow and cold and smelled of stone and old smoke. I moved through it carefully. Slowly. The warmth in my stomach was absolutely still now. Not afraid, focused. Like a held breath. I reached the sound-carrying stretch of wall. And I heard voices. Dorian. Low and controlled. Castor. Precise and flat. Marin. Measured and ancient. And a fourth voice. Male. Calm. The particular calm of a man who understands that calm is itself a form of power. The acceleration confirms it, the fourth voice was saying. The gestation rate we're observing is consistent with first blood emergence. At the current rate, the child will be fully manifest within. That timeline is not your concern, Dorian said. Alpha. A pause. A patience in it that felt deliberately performed. I am here as an ally. You are here as a courtesy, Dorian said. There is a distinction. Of course. The polished calm did not waver. I only mean to say, the window is narrow. Once the child is fully manifest, the containment process becomes significantly more. There will be no containment process, Dorian said, and his voice had dropped to that register I knew. The register that meant the conversation was over, and the person across from him should understand that without being told twice. That was not what was agreed. What was agreed, the fourth voice said, was cooperation in tracking the mother. What we found when we tracked her was beyond what either of our parties anticipated. A slight shift. Varek will not be patient about this indefinitely. Varek. There it was. Tell Varek that Ironvale's agreements remain as stated, Dorian said. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed, the fourth voice said pleasantly. That child is the first blood emergence in 4 centuries. Everything has changed. Silence. Then Marin's voice, quiet and final. This meeting is concluded. I heard movement. Chairs. Footsteps. I pulled back from the wall. Pressed myself against the passage's far side. Breathed. Cooperation in tracking the mother. Dorian had made an agreement with the Pale Court. Not to harm me. Clearly, evidently, he had drawn lines. But to track me. He had known where I was. All along. He had known, and he had sent them to watch the cabin before he came himself. And one of them was inside these walls right now. Inside the compound. The warmth in my stomach pulsed once, sharp and decisive. A warning. The certainty that moved through me next was not anger. It was older than anger. It was the bone-deep knowledge of a woman who understood, finally, the full shape of the trap she was standing in. Dorian had not brought me here to protect me from the Pale Court. He had brought me here because the Pale Court was already here. And whatever agreement he had made, however much he had drawn lines and pushed back, had put me directly in the center of the negotiation. My daughter. My daughter. Varek's target. Dorian's bargaining piece. I moved back through the passage. Back to the east wing. Back to the room where Sarah was waiting with the door locked and her eyes wide and her instincts, I was increasingly certain, sharper than anyone had given her credit for. I knocked. 2 taps. A pause. 1. The lock turned. She opened the door. 1 look at my face and she stepped back to let me in. I closed the door. Turned the lock. Leaned my back against it. And said, "We need to leave." Sarah stared at me. "Both of us," I said. "Both." "I can't do this alone," I said. Simply. Honestly. Because there was no time for anything else. And you are not safe here either, not if they know you're asking questions. She was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the fire. Then she looked at me. At my stomach. "Where?" she asked. "Priya," I said. "The healer. She knows about the bloodline. She has resources I don't yet understand." I met Sarah's eyes. And she is not affiliated with any pack, any alpha, any agreement that Dorian Kane has ever made. Sarah's jaw set. Something solidified in her expression. The fear was still there. But behind it, something clear and decided. "All right," she said. And then, quietly, with a steadiness that surprised me, "I can drive." She had come back to the stone walls for safety. But the walls had their own agreements. Their own debts. Their own gray-coated guest with polished calm and patient eyes. She had 1 hour, maybe less, before they noticed her car was gone. And somewhere beyond the territory borders, a man named Varek was not being patient. A man she had never heard of. A man whose name made Dorian Kane flinch. What was Varek? And what did he already know about her daughter? Chapter 7. The East Wing had its own exit. I had known this for 2 years and never used it. a narrow door at the end of the guest corridor, half hidden behind a tapestry of the old pack crest, designed in the original build for servants who moved between the compound and the storage buildings without crossing the main hall. I led Sarah to it without speaking. She followed without asking questions. Good, I thought. She has good instincts. The door opened onto a stone path that curved behind the east storage shed. Beyond the shed, the lower yard. Beyond the lower yard, the east vehicle track, which ran along the inside of the territory wall to the secondary gate. The secondary gate was used for supply deliveries. It was not watched the way the main gate was. The morning was cold. Gray light just beginning at the horizon. The pack's main compound was behind us and to the left. I could hear the kitchen sounds drifting across the yard, the first early voices of the day. We moved along the wall's shadow. Quick. Quiet. My car was in the main lot, too visible. Too close to the compound entrance. But Sarah's vehicle was in the supply track. She had parked it there last night, she told me in a whisper as we moved, because she hadn't wanted to be blocked in by Dorian's car and Castor's in the main lot. Good instincts. Good, careful instincts. We reached the secondary gate. It was closed but not locked. Supply drivers used a simple bolt mechanism, nothing electronic, nothing that required a code or a key. I slid the bolt. The gate opened. And a hand closed around my wrist. I spun. Dorian. He was alone. No Castor. No coat, just the dark shirt he'd been wearing since last night, sleeves pushed up, the look of a man who had not slept. His hand around my wrist was not rough. But it was certain. Don't, he said. I met his eyes. Let go of my arm. Where are you going? Away from the man in gray in your study. Something moved in his face, a quick crack in the composed surface. You heard. I heard enough, I said. Cooperation in tracking the mother. That was the agreement. I held his gaze. You led them to my cabin, Dorian. You let them watch me for weeks. I led them away from you, he said quietly. Every report I gave them was incomplete. Every location I confirmed was one I had already cleared of active threat. And now one of them is inside your walls. He arrived without invitation. I am handling it. By having a polite study meeting at 3 in the morning. His jaw tightened. Let go of my arm, I said again. He held for one more second. Then released. I stepped back. Put Sarah slightly behind me. Dorian looked at her briefly. Something complicated moved in his expression, then back at me. Varric knows where you are, he said. Running will bring him faster than staying. Who is Varric? A pause. Tell me, I said. Right now. No strategy. No management. Tell me what he is. Dorian ran one hand through his hair. A gesture I recognized. The only gesture that ever broke through the control. The thing he did when he was calculating and afraid simultaneously. Varric is old, he said. Older than any bloodline you know. He was once a scholar of the First Blood, one of the original Pale Court. Not a member. Not an archivist. He met my eyes. The founder. The air went very still. He has been searching for a First Blood emergence for 4 centuries, Dorian said. Since the last one. Since she disappeared, I said. He stopped. You know about her, he said. She comes to me when I sleep. I watched his face carefully. She told me to be careful who I trusted inside stone walls. Dorian absorbed this. Then, quietly, she is right. I know. I took one step toward the open gate. So you understand why I'm going. If you leave. If I stay, I said, there is a man in your study who reports to the person hunting my daughter. Staying is not safe, Dorian. Staying is comfortable for you. He flinched. Good. Lena. His voice had dropped, private now, stripped of everything formal. Just the voice I remembered from 2 years of dark mornings and low firelight. I know what I broke. I know I can't, he stopped. Started again. Just don't go somewhere I can't reach you. I looked at him for a long moment. At everything he was and everything he wasn't. At the grief in his face that was real and the failure that was also real. Priya's, I said finally. That's where we're going. I didn't know why I told him. Except that some part of me, the part that still remembered his voice in the dark, could not leave him with nothing. He nodded once. He stepped back. He let us go. Sarah drove south without being asked. I sat in the passenger seat with my hand flat on my stomach and my eyes on the mirror, watching the Ironvale gate shrink in the grey morning light. At the first bend in the road, I exhaled. He let you go, Sarah said. He did. She was quiet for a moment. He's never let anything go easily. I looked at her profile. Young. Steady. Something in the set of her jaw that reminded me of women I had respected. You're not what I expected, I said. She glanced at me. What did you expect? Someone who would stay. She considered this. I thought I would too, she said. Until the study door. We were 40 minutes south of Ironvale when the road changed. I felt it before I saw it. The warmth in my stomach, steady through the escape, steady through the gate and the cold and the bend in the road, went suddenly and completely flat. Not frightened. Suppressed. Like a candle cupped by a hand. Stop the car, I said. Sarah braked. What? Stop. I was already scanning the road ahead. The trees on either side. The grey morning light that had not yet fully arrived. Something is wrong. The road was empty. The forest was still. But the birds, the normal morning birds that should have been calling in the pines, were silent. Exactly as they had been at the cabin. Sarah's hands tightened on the wheel. There, she breathed. In the center of the road, 50 yards ahead, a single figure stood. Still. Patient. Dressed in grey. Waiting, with the particular stillness of someone who had waited a very, very long time. The road south was no longer clear. And the figure blocking it was not the man from the study. It was older. It was him. Chapter 8. I had expected a monster. I had spent the drive south building an image in my mind, something fearful, something that wore its predatory nature visibly. Teeth showing. Power advertised. That was not Verek. Verek was tall and thin and white-haired, and he stood in the road like a man who had grown there. Like something rooted. His coat was grey, not a pale new grey, but the grey of very old stone, of ash after a fire has been cold for days. His face was the face of a man of perhaps 60. His eyes were not. His eyes were wrong. Not terrifying, at first glance. Just wrong. The color was off. Not quite any color I had a word for. Between silver and bone. Like eyes that had forgotten what they looked like before they started looking at extraordinary things. He had seen too much. And his eyes had been changed by the seeing. He raised one hand as we sat unmoving in the car. A greeting. Not a threat. Somehow, that was worse. Don't get out, Sarah said, low and quick. I'm not. I watched him. My hand was pressed flat against my stomach. The warmth was completely suppressed. So far beneath the surface it was barely a flicker. My daughter, who had been steady through everything, was as silent as a stone. He's doing something. She's quiet. He's suppressing her. Can he do that? He already is. Verek's raised hand lowered. He began to walk toward the car. Not fast. Not slow. With the unhurried pace of someone who understood that running was not an option for the people he was approaching. Back up, I said. Slowly. Don't turn around. Sarah's hand went to the gearshift. And the car died. Not the engine cutting out from mechanical failure. Something cleaner than that. More complete. The instrument panel went dark. The quiet hum of the electrical system, the kind of quiet you only notice when it stops, stopped. Sarah turned the key. Nothing. He can do that too, I said. Verek stopped at the driver's side window. He looked at Sarah first. Briefly. Dismissively. The way you look at a locked door before deciding it isn't interesting. Then his eyes moved to me. And something in those two old eyes changed. Not hunger. Not possessiveness. Recognition. As if he had been looking at a photograph for 400 years and had finally found the living person it depicted. Lena Voss, he said. His voice moved through the window glass like sound through water. Low. Resonant. Aged in a way that had nothing to do with volume. You can speak through glass, I said. Among other things. Then say what you came to say. His eyes moved to my stomach. And his expression, that controlled, ancient face, softened. Not with warmth. With something like grief. She is more than what the Ironvale Alpha told you, he said. More than what the healer told you. His gaze lifted back to mine. More even than what Mira has told you in your sleeping hours. My blood chilled. He knew the name. Mira. The name the silver-eyed woman had given me in the dream. The private name. The ancient name. He knew it. What are you? I asked. I am what remains, he said, of the people who failed to protect the first blood the last time it walked. A pause. I have spent 4 centuries ensuring I do not fail again. You hunt first blood children. I did, he said. For 3 centuries I did. Because I believed that the emergence of first blood power in an unprepared world would lead to exactly the kind of warfare and consumption that destroyed the line the first time. His eyes held mine without wavering. I believed the mercy was containment. You believed killing children was mercy. Yes, he said simply. No deflection. No excuse. I was wrong. The silence between us stretched. I did not speak. He continued. There is a faction within the Pale Court, the one that has been watching you, that sent the observer into the Ironvale compound, that still believes as I once did. He tilted his head slightly. They do not know I am here. I did not come with them. You came separately. I came to warn you. About the faction. About what they plan to do, he said. And when? His expression went very still. At the full moon. 9 days from now. The child will be near full manifest by then. They will attempt the binding ritual during the lunar peak, when the power is most accessible and the child's defenses are. She has defenses. She is what she is, Varric said. Even sleeping, she is extraordinary. A pause. But the binding ritual requires proximity. They need to be within reach of her. Which means they need to be within reach of you. And if they can't reach me in 9 days? They will make a different plan, he said. They are patient. They are very patient. He looked at me steadily. But you should know that their current plan involves someone close to you. I waited. The Ironvale Alpha, he said. Everything in me went cold. Dorian doesn't. He does not know what he has agreed to, Varric said. The terms of his cooperation were presented to him in language he understood as protective. The agreement he signed in good faith, I believe, contains a clause he did not fully read. His voice was careful. Precise. A clause that grants the court access to any first blood emergence within Ironvale territory, for the purposes of, a pause. Safekeeping. Safekeeping. The word landed like a stone in still water. He signed something that gives them legal access to her, I said. Under court law, which predates Alpha law by 2,000 years, yes. And the clause was hidden. Buried in archaic language in the document's 3rd annex, Varric said. He had a lawyer review it. A human lawyer. Something crossed his face. It was not sufficient. I thought about Dorian. About the study meeting. About his voice when he said nothing has changed and the court member's response, everything has changed. The court member had known about the clause. And Dorian had not known what he didn't know. He had tried to draw lines in an agreement that had already drawn different ones around him. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Varric was quiet for a long moment. The grey morning pressed around us. His 2 old eyes moved to my stomach one more time. Because the last time a woman sat across from me, 400 years ago, and asked me the same question. A pause. Long. Heavy with something I couldn't name. I did not answer honestly. I looked at him. At the grief on that ancient face. You knew her, I said. The woman from my dreams. The silver-eyed woman. She was my daughter, Varric said. The world rearranged itself. Quietly. Completely. His daughter. The last first blood carrier. His daughter, 400 years ago. The binding ritual, I said slowly. The court, they killed her. I let them, he said. I believed it was mercy. His voice did not crack. It was too old to crack. It had been cracked for centuries and had hardened in those shapes. I convinced myself that containment was kindness. That the world was too dangerous for what she carried. That it would consume her. He met my eyes. It was not the world that consumed her. It was you. It was me, he said. A silence like stone. I have spent 400 years looking for the moment I can make a different choice, Varric said. This is that moment. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small object, dark leather, about the size of a pocket journal. He set it on the hood of the car. Everything the Pale Court knows. Their members. Their methods. The binding ritual and how to disrupt it. The contract clause and its legal nullification. The counter clause that voids it under court law if spoken before the full moon. He stepped back. It is yours. I looked at the leather-bound object. Then at him. If they find out you gave me this, I said. Then they will do to me what they have been unable to do for 400 years, he said simply. I am not concerned. He held my gaze for one last moment. Something in his eyes, not peace exactly, but a direction. A long-delayed one. She is extraordinary, he said softly. What she carries is extraordinary. Do not let them reduce her to a resource. He stepped back. Stepped off the road. Into the trees. Gone between one breath and the next, as quietly as if he had never stood there at all. The car hummed back to life. All the instruments glowing. Normal. Sarah's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. I reached through the window and retrieved the leather journal from the hood. Its surface was warm. Not with the warmth of being carried in a coat pocket. With something older. Intentional. As if it had been waiting. Drive, I said. Sarah drove. And in my hands, I held 400 years of a father's guilt, converted into the only thing that could save my daughter. Knowledge. He had given her the weapon. But weapons require hands willing to use them. And between now and the full moon, 9 days, 3 things had to happen. The contract had to be nullified. The faction had to be stopped. And Dorian Kane had to be told the truth about what he had signed. One of those 3 would be easy. None of them would be safe. Chapter 9. Priya opened her door before we knocked. Again. I was beginning to understand that this was not intuition. This was something else. She looked at me. At Sarah. At the leather journal in my hands. At my stomach. Her expression moved through several things quickly. Concern, assessment, recognition, and settled on something grave and focused. Come in, she said. Both of you. She made tea she didn't offer us and didn't drink herself. She read the leather journal at the table with the focused attention of someone who reads the way other people breathe. Automatically, completely, the external world receding as the text came forward. Sarah and I sat. The fire burned. Outside, birds called. Priya turned pages. I pressed my hand to my stomach and tried to feel my daughter. She was still muted, not as completely as when Varric had been present, but quieter than her usual steady warmth. Withdrawn. Resting after whatever effort the suppression had cost her. Or perhaps processing. Perhaps she had understood more of what happened on that road than I had. Priya, I said, after 20 minutes of silence. What does it say? She turned one more page. Then she looked up. The binding ritual, she said, is older than I realized. Older than any text in my collection. She looked at the journal with something close to awe. And the counterclause, Varric is correct. It exists. It predates the contract language by centuries. If you speak the nullification before the full moon, in the correct language, in the correct form, the agreement becomes void under court law. She tapped the page. Dorian's signature becomes meaningless. Can you translate the nullification? I asked. I can. I will. She set the journal down. Looked at me directly. But Lena, there's something else here. In the back section, the part written in the oldest script. She paused. It's not pale court documentation. I leaned forward. What is it? It's first blood history, she said. Written in a hand I don't recognize. Very old, centuries at least. She met my eyes. And it answers the question you've been carrying since the beginning. My hands stilled in my lap. The warmth stirred, slowly, like something waking. Tell me, I said. Priya was quiet for a moment, choosing her words. Not hesitating, composing. The way you compose before saying something that will permanently rearrange the world of the person listening. The first blood, she said, is not a genetic trait. Not entirely. It is a consciousness. Autonomous. Ancient. When a carrier dies, she looked at the journal. The spirit does not die with the body. It disperses. It waits. Varek said that. What Varek did not say, or perhaps did not know, is what it waits for. Priya looked up. It waits for a woman whose bond has been broken. The air in the room changed. Not any broken bond, she continued. A bond broken at the moment of its highest power. The claiming moment. The formal rejection, public, witnessed before the full pack. She held my gaze. The severing of that bond at that precise moment creates a tear. A brief opening in the spiritual architecture. I could not speak. The spirit moves through that opening, Priya said quietly. It doesn't require a biological father, Lena. It doesn't require a conventional conception. A pause. It chose you. At the moment Dorian rejected you, at the exact moment the bond tore, the first blood spirit moved through the wound and chose you as its mother. The warmth in my stomach rose. Slow. Rising. Like the sun coming over the horizon. Not mine. Hers. Rising to confirm what was being said about her. She has no father, I said. She has something older than a father, Priya said. She has a lineage. Thousands of years of it. Every woman who ever carried the first blood, every woman who was brave enough or broken enough to be the vessel, those women are her ancestry. Not one wolf. Not one alpha. She looked at my stomach. Every mother. All the way back. I pressed both hands flat against my stomach. The warmth rose higher. And then it did something it had never done before. It spoke. Not in words. In sensation. In image. In a rush of something so condensed and ancient and overwhelming that my eyes filled instantly, completely. Not from sadness, not from fear, from the sheer weight of being seen. I saw women. A flash, a cascade, dozens, hundreds, faces and names I had no words for. Women in forests and caves and stone houses and open plains. Women who had carried this same warmth, who had pressed their own hands to their own stomachs, who had whispered okay into the dark the way I had. And at the end of the cascade, one face. Silver eyes. Dark hair with light moving beneath it. Varek's daughter. Looking at me across 400 years. Thank you, she said. Not a dream. Not a voice. A gift. Handed down through the warmth, through my daughter, through the ancient consciousness that connected all of them. Thank you for choosing differently. I was crying. Properly, completely, without apology. Sarah had moved at some point. I found her beside me, her hand on my arm, saying nothing. Just present. Priya had closed the journal. The fire had burned lower. She chose me, I said finally. She chose you, Priya confirmed. At the worst moment of my life, I said. When he broke me in front of everyone, that's when she came. Yes. I thought about that. About the worst night of my life. About standing in that hall in white and feeling the bond sever and sliding to the cold ground outside against the oak tree and shaking. And inside that shaking, inside that breaking, something ancient and conscious and patient had looked at the wound and said, "Here. This one. She will do." Not because I was the strongest. Not because I was the most powerful. Because I had stood in front of an audience and been shattered, and I had not run in the moment of shattering. I had stood. I had walked out. I had held my spine straight. You walk like you belong, Lena. Even when you're afraid. Especially when you're afraid. My mother, I said softly. And then stopped. Because I understood. Suddenly, completely, with the clarity of something that had always been true and had simply been waiting for me to notice. My mother had carried this too. Before she was taken. Before I was 8 years old and newly orphaned and brought to a pack that was not my own. The warmth pulsed. Once. Yes. Oh, I breathed. Just that. Oh. We sat in Priya's cottage as the morning moved toward noon, and the three of us built something from the pieces on the table. A plan. Not a perfect one. But the kind that emerges when you stop waiting for safety and start working with what you have. 9 days. The nullification. Priya would translate it, I would learn it, I would speak it before Dorian and Elder Marin as legal witnesses before the full moon. Voiding the contract clause. The faction, Verek's documentation listed 7 confirmed members. 3 were currently near Ironvale. The others would converge for the ritual. We needed to understand the convergence point before they reached it. Dorian, he needed to know what he had signed. Not to ask his help. Not to put myself back under his authority. But because he had a right to know what his name had been used for. And because, I examined this carefully, honestly, without flinching from it, he was not the enemy. He had been wrong. He had been incomplete. He had made decisions from a position of incomplete information. But he had also let me walk through that gate. He had let me go. And when I had told him Priya's name, he had nodded and stepped back. That was not nothing. I need to call him, I said. Priya looked at me. Sarah looked at me. I looked at my hands. Not to go back, I said. To tell him what I know. Priya reached across the table and pushed my phone toward me. I dialed. It rang once. Lena. His voice was raw in a way I had never heard it. I closed my eyes briefly. There is a third annex in the agreement you signed, I said. Get it. Read it. Then call me back. A pause. How do you read it, Dorian? Silence. Then, give me 10 minutes. You have 5, I said. And then I have something else to tell you. He called back in 4. I had never heard him sound the way he sounded when he called back. Not the granite. Not the practiced control. Just a man who had found the thing he hadn't known was there, and was standing in the wreckage of the assumption that he had protected something. I didn't read the third annex, he said. I know. I gave them access to. I know. I kept my voice steady. He needed steady from me right now, not anger. I know. And I know how to void it. But Dorian, I took a breath. You need to get the observer out of your compound. Today. Before he reports the annex has been discovered. He's already gone, Dorian said. Flat. Cold. The voice of a man who had handled something swiftly and without ceremony. 20 minutes after you left. He had already known. He had spent this morning, the hours since the gate, doing exactly what he always did. Managing. Controlling. Removing. Verek came to us, I said. A pause. He helped you. He gave me everything the court has. I looked at the leather journal on the table, including the counterclause that voids your signature. Then void it, he said immediately. Without hesitation. Whatever you need from me, witnesses, documentation, presence, I am there. I looked at Priya. She nodded once. Full moon minus 9 days, I said. We need to act before then. Tell me where you are, he said. I hesitated. The warmth in my stomach pulsed. Not warning. Not alarm. Something quieter. More complicated. Your choice, it said. Always your choice. Priya's, I said. Come alone. Agreed. I hung up. Sarah was watching me. You trust him, she said. Not an accusation. A genuine observation. I looked at the phone. I trust what he does more than what he says, I said. And what he's doing, right now, is exactly what I need. I looked up at her. That's enough. For now, that's enough. That afternoon, while Priya translated the counterclause and Sarah kept watch at the window, I sat by the fire and talked to my daughter. Out loud. Not whispering. Not in the dark. In full voice, in full daylight, in the warm interior of a healer's cottage that smelled like herbs and old books. I told her about the cascade of women I had seen. I told her about Verek's daughter, her ancestor, in some profound, non-biological sense, who had waited 400 years to say thank you. I told her about the three-mooned forest, and the silver eyes, and the name that pulsed through me when I heard it. Mira. First light, I said softly. That's what it means. The warmth rose. Warm and blazing and joyful, the way it had been in the dream when the silver-eyed woman first said the name. Mira, I said again. The warmth surged. Yes, it said. Yes. 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 And outside the window, in the afternoon sky above Priya's cottage. I am not making this up, I will never be able to explain it, the clouds broke. Just briefly. Just for a moment. And the light came through. She had a name. Not a mystery. Not a power source. Not a target. A name. And in 9 days, she would have something more. She would have a mother who had burned down every obstacle between them. If the full moon did not come for them first. Chapter 10. Dorian arrived at dusk. Alone, as promised. No castor. No convoy. No formal pack presence. Just the man, his car, and the look on his face when Priya opened the door. A look that moved through the room and settled on me with the weight of something long overdue. I didn't stand. I was at the table with Priya's translation of the counterclause spread before me, the archaic syllables marked phonetically in her neat hand, learning them the way you learn a language you were always supposed to know. Dorian sat across from me without being asked. He looked at the translation. At the leather journal. At my hands, flat on the table, pressing the words into my palms. How long until you have it? He asked. I have it now, I said. I've had it for 2 hours. He nodded. A silence settled between us. Not hostile. Not comfortable. Something in between, the silence of two people who have said the things that needed saying and have not yet found the shape of what comes next. Sarah was in the kitchen with Priya. I could hear their voices, low and purposeful, Priya teaching, Sarah learning, the two of them moving through the cottage's rhythms as if they had been doing it for years. She's good, Dorian said quietly, nodding toward the kitchen. She is, I agreed. You didn't see it. He absorbed that without deflecting. I didn't look. No. Another silence. I want to explain the ceremony, he said. I know what you're going to say. You know part of it. He met my eyes. The Pale Court had your name 3 months before the ceremony. I confirmed it through a source I trusted, one I now know was feeding partial information to the court itself. His jaw tightened. I thought the public rejection would remove you from their calculation. That if I severed the bond formally, made it visible and final, they would determine you held no strategic value to me. You thought making me worthless would make me safe. Yes. And you couldn't tell me. The source I mentioned, a pause, was inside my inner council. I didn't know who. If I had told you privately, and they had overheard, I would have become a liability instead of a discard, I said. Yes. I looked at the counterclause translation, at Priya's neat phonetic marks. It still should have been different, I said. Even within those constraints. It still should have been different. I know, he said. For the 3rd time. And this time it carried the full weight of all 3. I looked up. You won't get her, I said. Not cruelly. Even after all of this, even if we void the clause and stop the faction and Mira is born safe, she is mine. She is not Ironvale's. She is not your heir. She does not belong to the Alpha bloodline or any pack hierarchy. I held his gaze. She belongs to herself. To her lineage. To the women who carried her before me. Dorian held my gaze for a long moment. And then he said something I was not prepared for. I know, he said. And I'm not here for her. I waited. I'm here for you, he said. Simply. Only that. If you'll have it. The faction moved on day 7. Not day 9. 2 days early, which meant either the astronomical window had shifted, or they had discovered Verek's defection, or both. It was Sarah who saw them first. She had taken the dawn watch, her idea, not mine, and I had stopped arguing with her good instincts 3 days ago. She was at the east window when the grey shapes appeared at the tree line. 1, 2, 4. She was at my door before the fourth one stepped from the trees. "They're here," she said. I was already awake. I had been awake for an hour, the warmth in my stomach shifting, restless, the way it had learned to signal approaching threat. Mira knew first. Of course she did. There were 7 of them. Exactly as Verek's documentation had listed. They emerged from the forest in a loose formation. No urgency, no aggression visible. The studied calm of people who believed the outcome was already decided. The binding ritual required proximity. But it also required something else, which I had read 3 times in the journal's back section. It required consent. Not the mother's consent. The child's. Some ancient mechanism in the first blood spirit, some deep self-protective architecture, meant the ritual could not proceed if the spirit actively refused. Verek had written this with the gravity of a man who understood exactly what it meant. "My daughter refused," he had written in the margin, in a different ink, older, more faded, the handwriting smaller and less steady. And I overrode it. I thought I knew better than what she carried. I was wrong in a way that has no correction. I had read that margin note 4 times. I was ready. Priya's cottage had protections I had not initially seen. Older ones. Layered into the structure over decades. Herb bundles with significance beyond aroma. Copper wire in the foundation patterns that echoed Ironvale's gate but predated it by a century. "It won't stop them," Priya said, standing beside me as we watched the 7 approach through the window. "But it will slow the ritual architecture. Give you time." Dorian was at the door. Not as alpha. Not performing power. Just standing. A man who had made a mistake and was determined to be useful in the correction. Castor was not there. Dorian had come alone as promised. But I looked at him and thought, this is enough. One man who is actually present is worth more than a convoy of correct gestures. I moved to the center of the cottage. I pressed my hands to my stomach. "Mira," I said. "I need you with me." The warmth rose. Full and blazing. Not suppressed. Not withdrawn. Present. Like a hand in mine. "Ready," it said. "Ready." The lead figure stopped outside Priya's threshold. Medium height. Gray-coated. The face of a bureaucrat, organized and certain and without cruelty in the conventional sense. Just the blankness of a person who has reduced a living child to a line item. "Lena Voss," he said. His voice carried the same resonant quality as Verek's, old training, old practice. "You're early," I said. Something shifted in his composure. "We are exactly on time." "The full moon is 2 days from now," I said. "The window is flexible," he said. "And circumstances have changed." A pause. "Verek." "Yes," I said. "Verek." The bureaucrat's blankness tightened into something thin and sharp. "What he gave you is not a legal instrument," he said. The counterclause he cited was nullified by a secondary court ruling in 1847, I said. Priya had found this. Had anticipated it. Had prepared me for exactly this moment. "I know. But the nullification of the counterclause requires a full court vote, and no full court vote has taken place since 1831. Which means the ruling is procedurally void." I held his gaze. Verek knew this. He also knew you would use it. It's all in the documentation. The thin sharpness became something else. Frustration. From a man who did not expect to be frustrated by the woman he had come to collect. Good. Chapter 11. The speaking of the counterclause was not dramatic. I want to be honest about that, because the stories always make these moments enormous. Thunder. Light. The earth trembling. What actually happened was quieter. I stood in Priya's cottage with my hands on my stomach and my eyes closed, and I spoke the words she had translated, the ancient syllables, some of them sounds I had no natural frame for. shaped by a language older than any pack, older than any alpha bloodline, older than the hierarchy that had governed the world I had grown up in. Dorian stood as witness. Priya stood as witness. Sarah stood as witness. The words moved through me. Not through my voice. Through me, through my ribs, my blood, my hands, the warmth pulsing against them. As if my daughter was speaking them with me. As if every woman in that cascade I had seen was lending her breath to the syllables. When I finished, I felt it. Not dramatic. Not thunder. A release. Like a snare opening. Like a cord I hadn't known was around my wrist finally going slack. Dorian exhaled. He felt it too, the voiding of his name from something it had been attached to without his full understanding. Outside, beyond Priya's threshold, the lead court member had gone very still. He was on the phone. I could see him through the window, the brief, controlled panic of a man receiving confirmation of something he had believed impossible. The clause was void. His legal foundation for the ritual was gone. He could still attempt it. But now it would not be sanctioned, not be protected, not be defensible under any law, old or new. He would be operating without authority. And authority, I had learned, was the only thing the Pale Court actually worshipped. He tried anyway. I had expected this. 3 of the 7 broke from the formation and moved toward the cottage. Dorian moved first. Not with aggression, with the kind of absolute body-forward certainty that is its own form of communication. He positioned himself between the approaching 3 and the cottage door, and he did not speak. He simply stood. And his wolf rose. Fully. The shift between human presence and alpha presence is something you feel in your sternum. A pressure change, a gravity increase, the air around a dominant wolf becoming a different substance. The 3 stopped. Not because Dorian was threatening them. Because they were old and they were patient, and they were calculating. And what they were calculating, standing at the edge of Priya's threshold, was whether this was winnable. The clause was void. Their authority was gone. The Alpha of Ironvale was standing between them and their target. The target herself was standing tall, both hands on her stomach, eyes open and absolutely steady. And beneath her hands, visible to anyone with old enough eyes to see it, a light. Soft. Gold. Not blazing. Dawn-colored. First light. Mirror. The lead member made a decision. He lowered his phone. He looked at me. And something crossed his face that I had not expected. Not from a man who had spent centuries believing that what he did was mercy. Doubt. Just for a moment. Just long enough. This is not finished, he said. It is finished, I said. Today here, it is finished. What you do next is your choice. But you no longer have legal standing, you no longer have the ritual window, and you no longer have surprise. I looked at him steadily. And you should know that everything Varek gave me has been copied and distributed. To 3 healers, 2 pack elders outside Ironvale's territory, and 1 human archivist who does not know what she's holding but will know exactly who to send it to if anything happens to me. Priya had done this overnight. While I slept. Without telling me. I had found the copies on the table this morning with a note that said simply, "Protection is better with more hands." The lead member looked at me. At Dorian. At the soft gold light visible beneath my hands. At a situation that had become, entirely and irreversibly, not what he had planned. He turned. He walked back to the tree line. The 6 others followed. And the forest took them. The silence they left behind was enormous. Sarah made a sound, half laugh, half something that was definitely not crying but occupied the same territory. Priya sat down. Heavily. In the chair by the fire. The posture of a woman who had been holding something rigid for days and had just been given permission to set it down. Dorian turned from the door. He looked at me. Something in his face, the granite completely gone. Just the man underneath. Tired and full of something I recognized because I had felt it myself, recently. Relief that costs. The kind that comes after fear. "It's done," he said. "For now," I said. "For now," he agreed. And somehow, in those 2 words, in the acknowledgement of impermanence, in the honest admission that for now was all any of us ever really had, something settled between us that was different from anything we'd had before. Not romance. Not the old bond. Something quieter. Truth. Chapter 12. 3 days after the pale court retreated, I drove back to the cabin. Alone. Not because I was running. Because I needed to stand in the place where everything had started, the clearing, the cold yard, the splintered wood from the log I had shattered, and understand what I was carrying forward. The door was unlocked, as I'd left it. Inside, the charcoal marks were still on the wall. Day by day. A record of survival. I stood in the center of the room and pressed my hands to my stomach. Mirror moved. Fully, firmly, a rolling pressure that was unmistakably deliberate, unmistakably her. The first movement I had felt clearly enough to recognize as movement rather than energy. "Hello," I said out loud. My voice cracked once. Just once. The movement came again. "Hello." I sat in the cabin for an hour. I read back through my journal, the record I'd started keeping in week 1. The fear. The sickness. The 2 lines on the test. The warmth I hadn't known what to call. I added one final entry. She is not a mystery. She is not a danger. She is not anyone's resource or ritual subject or political leverage. She is Mira. First light. And she chose me. At the worst moment of my life, she chose me. I am choosing her back. Dorian came to the cabin that afternoon. I had expected this. He knocked, 3 measured strikes, and waited. I let him wait for a moment that was longer than necessary. Then I opened the door. He looked at the charcoal marks on the wall over my shoulder. Something moved through his face. "May I come in?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He entered carefully, the way he had learned to do around me. No sweeping, no occupation of space. Just moving into the room as a guest who understood the terms of the invitation. He looked at the marks. Counted them. "You were here for a long time," he said. "Long enough." He turned to face me. And the thing he had been carrying since the night at Priya's cottage, the thing he had been building toward, that I had watched him prepare for in the quiet hours of the past 3 days, arrived in his expression. Ready. Terrified. Honest. "I am not going to ask you to come back to Ironvale," he said. "I am not going to ask you to take a title or a position or anything that puts you back under the architecture I built." He held my gaze. "I am asking if you will let me be present. In whatever form that takes. In whatever form you decide is acceptable." A pause. Not for the pack. Not for an heir. Not for any of the reasons I told myself the first time. His voice dropped. "For you. Only that." I looked at him. At the man who had broken me in front of an audience for reasons that were wrong, even if they were afraid, even if they came from a twisted version of care. At the man who had stepped back from the gate and let me go. At the man who had stood in front of Priya's door, alone as promised, and placed himself between my daughter and what was coming without asking for anything in return. I looked at him for a long time. And the warmth in my stomach pulsed. Not telling me what to decide. Just present. "Your choice," it said. "Always your choice. You will make no decisions about her," I said. "None. She is not Ironvale's. She is not your bloodlines. She belongs to herself and to the women who carried her before me." "Agreed," he said. "You will not use her presence to claim authority over me." "Agreed. And if I decide on any given day that I need you further away, then I go," he said. Without hesitation. I breathed. In. Out. The cabin held us both. "Sit down," I said finally. He sat. And we stayed in the cabin as the afternoon light moved across the floor. Not talking about the future, not making promises that neither of us could guarantee, not pretending that broken things become unbroken just because you've finished breaking them. Just sitting. Just present. Just here. Which, for now, was enough. She had come to this cabin with nothing. She was leaving it with something she had no word for yet. But Mira did. She had always had the word. From the very beginning. It was the same word as her name. First light. The light that comes before the sun. The light that says, something is coming. Something warm. Something that was always going to arrive. You only had to survive the dark long enough to see it. She was born on a Tuesday. I know it was Tuesday because I had been counting again. Not on a cabin wall this time, on a proper calendar, pinned above a proper desk, in the small house I had found at the edge of a valley that belonged to no pack and answered to no alpha. Priya delivered her. Sarah was in the next room. She had her own reasons for staying close, her own ongoing reckoning with the life she was building from the pieces of the one she'd left. She had become something I hadn't planned for and couldn't now imagine being without. A friend. The real kind. The kind forged in crisis and held through ordinary days. Dorian was outside. Not in the room. Not at my side claiming something the moment wasn't his to claim. Outside. Where I had asked him to be. Where he had been, quietly, without complaint, for 6 months. She came into the world in the early morning. The light was exactly right, the particular grey gold of pre-dawn, the hour before the sun commits. First light. Priya placed her in my arms and stepped back. I looked at her. And she, impossibly, undeniably, looked back. Not the unfocused gaze of a newborn navigating the shock of arrival. Looked back. Directly. Clearly. With eyes that were dark now but held something underneath. A shimmer, a depth, the distant suggestion of silver. The warmth that had lived in my stomach for 7 months moved. Outward. Into the room. Into the air. A wave of something gold and unhurried and certain that moved through every person present, and through the walls, and through the morning air outside, and apparently through the man standing on the porch because I heard him exhale from where I sat. A long, shaking exhale. Like a man who has been holding his breath for months. "Hello, Mira," I said. She made a sound. Small. New. Improbably human and improbably ancient at the same time. And in the dream space that would always, I now understood, be part of how she communicated with me. "Hello, Mama." I let Dorian in after an hour. He came to the door and stood in it, not crossing the threshold until I nodded. When I nodded, he crossed. He stood at the edge of the room and looked at her from a distance. I watched his face. The granite was completely, permanently gone. What was there instead was something I had never seen on Dorian Kane's face before. The face of a person who has just understood something they cannot undo, cannot control, and does not want to. Or, pure and quiet and without agenda. He stopped. "I know," I said. He looked at me. Something passed between us. Not the old bond, not the severed cord, not the architecture of what we'd been. Something new. Something that had no name yet but would, in time, grow one. He nodded. He sat in the chair by the window. And Mira, in my arms, turned her ancient new eyes toward the light. In a forest with 3 moons, a woman with silver eyes smiled. She had been waiting a long time. Not patiently, that word was too passive. She had been waiting with everything she had, across every dark century, across every year of her father's grief and guilt and finally his redemption. She had been waiting with love. The kind that does not require a body. The kind that moves through wounds and broken bonds and cold October nights against oak trees. She had found the right woman. She always knew she would. She had just needed her to be broken open first. Not broken. Open. There is a difference. Lena understood that now. And as the first true light of morning came through the valley house window and settled across the face of the child in her arms, golden warm and unhurried, the silver-eyed woman released a breath she had held for 400 years. And rested. Finally. At last. The first light had come home. The N.